Welcome to the Competitive Advantage. Today's guest is a kind of operator most founders quietly identify with and the kind they don't want to look at too closely. Simon Harling built Elite Fitness in Cardiff over 15 years, a 10,000 square foot purpose-built facility, £250,000 of investment, a sports science lab, a gym floor, and room to play. Inside the first year, he was at six figures, Cycling Weekly, Men's Health, Athletics Weekly all wrote about him. Welsh Golf was on his book, WRU. Alongside the gym, he was running fitness coaching at Torquay, then Brentford, whilst also working for Glamorgan Cricket and Cardiff University. He published research. He's published research cited over 60 times, but every external read he was winning. In 2019, after 15 years, the bailiffs barricaded the doors. The lease elapsed. There was a £12,000 rent balance. He offered to restructure. The landlord said no. Simon walked out of his own building, carrying a box, past the bailiff, who told him, "I'll see you soon." What's interesting isn't the failure. Plenty of founders fail. What's interesting is that Simon spent the next 5 years writing down with unusual honesty exactly the warning flags he saw, ignored, and what he was telling himself at the time to justify each one. The book is Good Coach, Bad Coach, and it's one of the most candid postmortems on a service business we come across. Simon, welcome to the Competitive Advantage.
Thank you for having me, Justin and Liam, and thank you for the introduction. It made me shift quite awkwardly in my seat. And it is a great opportunity and I appreciate the opportunity to have that conversation around our relationship with success and failure. And I think that's really what I hope the point of the book is, and really one of the key tenets of coaching is to talk about what we think success is and what we think failure is, and how we plan accordingly. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
you're very welcome,
to have you
Simon.
on, because we spoke before the show about and what we spot at the business end are early warning signs of failure, and leaders probably ignoring them, and we call them false positives.
Welcome, Simon. So let's crack on and get into it. So, Simon, you hit six figures in your first year, magazine features, university contracts, professional sports clients, by every founder metric people use to validate themselves. You were spot on. But in the book, you say the cracks were already there, that you were watching them and choosing not to see them. Take us back to that period. What was the first warning flag for you? And what was the story you told yourself at the time, and why it didn't matter yet?
I think to kind of understand the story, I was at a time, I was 32 at the time. I'd recently qualified, got a master's degree. I was working in professional sport. And I had a lot of money accessible to me. And so on all measures, I'm getting a lot of feedback about what is success, and equally that pretty much everything I'm doing is being successful. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, right, I need a platform for my coaching. It's at a time when professionalism in sport wasn't as strong as it is now. You would not, where it is now compared to 20, 25 years ago, is unrecognizable. And I saw an opportunity to create a platform for my coaching and to elevate the services that were being provided to professional outfits. Liam mentioned earlier about Glamorgan Cricket, Cardiff Rugby, Welsh University, WRU. There was a long list of people we were providing support to, and so I'm at that place where I think, right, if I build this facility, it's a 10,000 square foot facility that took an awful lot of money. If I build this, they will come. And so I was immediately at scale. And when you're at scale running a business, it's like learning to fly a plane at 30,000 feet. You don't really care where you're going. All you care about is keeping the thing in the air. And that's ultimately your purpose. And so I realized very quickly that I'd taken a big chunk out of this and I'd taken on a lot. But at the same time, most of the feedback, if not all of the feedback, is positive. I'm featured on TV. I'm getting a lot of media. We're successful in terms of the business metrics. However, I am thinking, I don't know how to run this, but I'll figure it out. And so I'm at scale, and that's the critical issue there.
How do you deal with that in your own
Liam.
mind? That you say you're at scale, but you knew perhaps you're out of your depth there in terms of what to do?
Yeah, I was absolutely out of my depth, and of course, when you're learning, there is that element of, if you're going into the water, you need to learn to swim. You just go into the water just deep enough that you can't touch the bottom. I went straight into the Atlantic and jumped straight into the. I did. There was, my feet weren't going to touch the ground by about 10,000 meters, let alone a couple of inches. I just went straight into the deep end, and so what could you say about that at that time? Well, I didn't have the prerequisite skills in terms of management. I was a very good coach at that time. I worked to become an expert. As you said, the research had been strong. I was heavily accredited. I had a lot of contracts. There's an awful lot that looks positive. However, if you're looking at the competitive advantage, you've also got to look at what skills and what environment did I need. And if you look at the skills, I hadn't managed people before. I'd never run a business before. As I said, I'd created a facility that was at scale. So I'm separating out what I think success is compared to what the task was at that time. Completely different. And so that's something I do a lot of now in terms of practice development for coaches, is helping them see where they think they're successful and where they need to develop the skills in the environment to actually become successful.
So Simon, tell us, what sort of team did you have around you? Did you have anyone to lean on, with any of these skills that you didn't have? Was there any management help, or outside of the coaching? Was there, accountancy? Who was around you? Who were you leaning on at the time to help you navigate this situation?
Well, that's interesting, because Wales at the time, you had the WDA, the Welsh Development Agency, and that had shifted, and they brought various agencies in, and one of them was Business in Focus, which is no longer available. And they provided me with an accountant. So my spreadsheets were fantastic. My spreadsheets were award-winning, but that didn't help me. That didn't help me at all, because contextually, that wasn't the issue. That wasn't the problem. It was around relationships, around managing people, and understanding the game that I'm playing. And that's one of the things that I talk about a lot with coaches and founders is, do you understand the game that you're playing? And the metrics and the story that you're telling yourself will be part of that, but do you actually understand the game that you're playing right now? Because those metrics and that narrative will of course be pointing you in a particular direction. But if you don't understand the game you're playing, you are absolutely going in the wrong direction. So, and the other thing is, when you're coming across as an expert, as somebody who knows what they're doing in their field, it's very easy for people to go, oh, this guy's capable. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's got a compelling narrative. He understands the market. He understands his job. But there are so many critical skills that were missing that nobody flagged up, and only I discovered what was required post, which, as I mentioned earlier, if you're flying at 30,000 feet, you better start figuring out what you need to do very quickly. And so that's something that I do an awful lot of now, is practice development. So the vogue is to do coach development, but certainly practice development in terms of considering the environment you're in and the skills you need. That's critical. An example of the skills required, or an example of the game.
The difference between what you're saying there about practice development as opposed to coach development. Can you give us like a bog standard example? Okay,
so if you consider so coach development is like who's going to coach the coach, and that's become something that has developed in sport in the last 5-10 years. As more and more coaches have appeared, we've kind of gone, right, okay, well, who's coaching those guys? And so the whole field of coach development has increased, and I would argue that's fine. However, if you haven't considered the environment in which you're operating in the first place, it doesn't really matter whether they've got the tactics right or they've got the essence of their approach, because if they don't understand the game they're playing, so in other words, if they don't feel stable, they don't feel secure, it's that. And this is why I think the business end is really interesting, because you're looking at business and you're looking at sport, and you're looking at marrying those two things. And of course, when you look at purpose and you look at development, you're kind of caught between the two. And so it's that idea which I talk about in the book about Buridan's donkey. You kind of like, am I going for the hay or am I going for the water? Am I going for the hay? Am I going for the water? And you get kind of caught out between the two. And so one of the things to talk about with coaches is right, okay, well, have you dialed in your environment? Have you figured out what you need to be successful? Do you understand the conditions under which you're going to bring out the best in you and the people around you? And if you haven't considered that, I'm not too interested in the tactics. I'm not too interested in your game model, because you're not going to express yourself in a way that feels useful and that you're going to be able to contribute to other people unless you feel secure. And so the tagline for the book is build a practice where you belong. And so as soon as you've got that element of security and stability and you feel comfortable in your own practice and it belongs to you and it's intentional, now you've got a chance. Because before that, as I figure out in the book, is most of the decisions are being driven by the fact that the scale of the business is so enormous that I'm not in control of it. So therefore, if I'm not in control of that practice and I'm at a scale which is way too big for what I need, they're driving the decisions, not me. I'm not being intentional in my practice at all. I'm basically firefighting. And so if I've got that in a situation when I'm working with people, we can have great conversations around, okay, well, I'm going to deliver this in this practice. However, if you haven't dialed in those elements of your practice, it's going to be so hit and miss.
Mm-hmm. Just one question before I go into the next one, Simon. When you realise, you think, yeah, I'm out of my depth, what was a positive, or I'm going to say a false positive, that you were telling yourself, oh, it'll be all right, I know what I'm doing? I mean, what were you telling yourself, or how were you like dealing with that mentally?
That I could do it. That pretty much everything at this point had been work harder, do more, be relentless. That was absolutely, and as a sports person whose background is endurance sport, that's an easy trap to fall into, right? That you can dig your way out of this. But that as I mentioned, that negates this idea of, well, what else can you do? You can do relentless. Relentless is like that's your default. But what else have you got? What other skills? Justin, you mentioned what other support do you need? Mm-hmm. And so who have you got challenging you? Who have you got asking you these questions that allow you? And this is the great bit about coaching. That's what great coaches do. They help you see your choices. If you can't see your choice, you're not going to fix it. You'd like absolutely no chance, unless it's luck. But of course, so a great coach will help you see. Say, okay, well, all right. And that's a lot of what I do now is help coaches see their choices. And so once you begin to see what's available to you and where you are and the context of your situation, that's when you've got a chance. That's when you're in the game.
Yeah. So, I mean, I suppose part of my next question might help on this as well. So let's talk about the credit crunch, the great financial crisis when 2008, which burned a lot of businesses. I experienced it myself, and it was vicious. Now, can you tell me, you're like, knee deep in contracts, commitments. At what point do you think I should have changed my business model, but I didn't? And do you think the ramifications of what you experienced 10 years later came from that situation in 2008, 2009, but you didn't move quick enough, perhaps?
The first decision was the worst decision, which is scale. That was it. There on in, it's about whether the systems and the environment in which I'm in allow me to get away with that mistake. And so the credit crunch comes. We're on the wall in Elite Fitness. It looked like an old New York warehouse. Wooden floor. It was stunning. Wooden floors, looked amazing. 10,000 square foot. And on the wall, I'd stenciled, "It's not the taking part that counts," right? That's what's on the wall. As you come in, bang. The whole facility has got sports science, it's got plate-loaded kit, it's got serious operators in there. You've got the who's who of Welsh sport training in there. And so it's at that point, that's where I am. And that's a story I'm telling myself, and that's a story that's out there, and it makes an awful lot of sense. I've got contracts, I've built the facility, it's all there. 2008, I got a Zumba class going on. Because that's what it takes. No, if anyone's still into Zumba, I'm good with Zumba. We've even seen the French Sevens team doing dance routines. So before anyone writes in, I'm good with Zumba. But in terms of the intention, that illustrates that I'm pretty much taking decisions, as I mentioned earlier, that are driven by trying to survive, not by an intentional practice. And that's the difference between being a practice developer, somebody who helps somebody understand their practice and the creation of what they need and the environment they need, and somebody who's going, well, I'll help you be a coach. Because there's a hierarchy here, there's a hierarchy of needs, that's driving these decisions.
So just on that though, I mean, do you think you would have done anything differently? Because, pre-2007, 2008, the economy's booming. And you're ambitious, you want to succeed. Do you think, would you have actually sat back? I mean, there's a business lesson here for sure, but would you have sat back and said, no, I'm not going to do this, because what happens if things go belly up and the economy tanks? But that, it sounds to me like that just wasn't in your plan. It wasn't in mine either, I've got to say. So,
Exactly that. And, this is the thing. So coaching is that conversation between people and groups about what success and failure looks like. I'm on the success all day long. As you mentioned, Liam, I'm success all day long. I'm not having that conversation about failure. You can design for failure. Engineers will tell you can design for failure. You have to design for failure. Your bridge has to be load bearing. If it's not if we don't know what the load bearing numbers are, we're in a bit of trouble. And so that conversation is not being had. And so, the opportunity to have a conversation about what success and failure looks like, absolutely. And the question that I would ask myself now, and I still do, I'm still doing it right at this moment, is coming out the other side and building my practice, is what's the smallest step that I could take now? As opposed to, and what that does is that anchors you in, what's this actually about? And initially it was about status. It was about name on the door. It was about being having the biggest, best facility, which I achieved, no question. But that was driving my decisions, the status around it, as opposed to thinking about the work. What's the work? What's the thing that I can do today? I can coach. I'm good at coaching. I enjoy coaching. Well, and this is, I was saying about the conflict between business and coaching, is all of a sudden I'm being pulled. I'm being pulled over here when actually I want to coach. I don't want to manage a 10,000 square foot facility. What am I doing with that? So when you ask the question, what's the smallest thing I can do? It identifies what's actually behind this. What's driving these decisions? What's actually driving these decisions? With status. It was the fact that I'm an expert. It's the fact that I've got this platform. It's the fact that it's amazing. And look, you've got Colin Jackson over there. You've got Jamie Balsh over there. I'll drop the names as a point. You've got the WI over here, right? Look at this. That's a status move. And it gets in the way of the work. And so that's an awful lot of the conversations now is like, well, what does a work look like? What's actually driving this? What do you actually need to do? So I didn't have that conversation, and that's partly why I wrote the book, is because I want coaches to look through a lens and to begin to challenge their practice. And that could be coaches, that could be practitioners, it's applicable to a lot of people.
Yeah, like you say, you've got to know what you're in. As you said at the start, know what you're dealing with from the outset, and therefore you might have had a plan B if things went wrong. But I mean that crisis happened so quickly, and you weren't the first person to get caught up in that. So,
No, and absolutely. And so my business model shifted, and it did shift. It shifted from performance orientated to all of a sudden I'm letting Zumba and street dance, and people are asking me, how much is your membership? Which is something which I at the time that wasn't an issue for the first 4 or 5 years, and so the business model completely shifted, and that's the point where I should have quit, because that's the point at which the thing that I was trying to do had gone. Nevertheless, I haven't spotted it. So the thing that I'm trying to do, the performance element, the coaching, the sports science, that's going. And now I'm into a commercial. I'm into lots of people coming into the gym. I'm into much more service orientated. I'm much more consumer orientated. We're not talking to so many athletes anymore. We're talking to people who they want to come in, they want to get fit. And they don't want to talk, they're not interested in being put on the hook for their performance. Whereas a lot of my athletes, where I was successful, is because they wanted to be told what to do. And I was really good at that. I could tell an athlete what to do because that was my expertise. And they would do it, and that's where I was getting success is okay, this is where you are, this is what you need to do, go and do it. And they'd do it. And they were very intentional. Whereas when it comes into dealing with the general public and you're dealing with large numbers, that becomes far more relational. That becomes far more nuanced. People are there for lots of different reasons. And so the business is completely shifting. And that's when I began to think about, well, what is my coaching for? What is this about? I'm very good at telling people what to do. I'm not very good at dealing with people when it becomes relational, and I've got to because I'm used to we're doing this. This is how we're doing it. This is how we're executing it. I'm the expert. Let's get on with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That works, but it only works in certain situations, and it certainly doesn't work with the general public.
So two important questions, two quick questions before Fitzy goes on to the next one. The first one is, was there a moment in time, can you pick a moment in time when you think, I should change your business model right now, but you didn't? Was there any specific moment when you thought like that?
Oh, as I said earlier, it's when you've got like Zumba in the room, when all of a sudden you're making choices that you wouldn't have made 4 or 5 years ago, and you've lost the reason that you're doing this thing. And
okay,
that's when you need to quit. That's when you needed to have decided that 5 years ago. So there's that idea about ultramarathon runners. The ultramarathon runners decide what they're going to do before they run the race, because when they're in the race, they're way too emotional. It's going to be all right. I've only peed blood once. It's going to be fine. I'll be all right. I've done this before. I've got multiple blisters and my feet it's fine. I'll be all right. It's emotional. And once you're in it, you're done and dusted. It takes a lot to come out of it. Whereas if you can decide beforehand what your quit is and it's unemotional, that's the point at which you can begin to design your practice and go, right, at this point, I'm done. If I get here, I'm out. The moment that happens, that's my signal. And so that's critical, because we all jump in where we probably shouldn't, right? And that, and we run with people that we shouldn't probably run with, and we jump into decisions. That is fine, but once you're in it, you've got to recognize it's very difficult to see it. And so what coaching does is it offers you another perspective, because you're in it. It goes, okay, well, all right. Well, what if we take you over here for a minute and show you this option, this information? Does that change how you're thinking? You're like, oh, why didn't I see that before? You're in it. How many times have we done that? Where we're running in situations where we think you can't see it. So that for me is where coaching really comes in, and that's what I've learned from my experiences.
So as a coach, I mean, we get very few people that talk about quitting, and it's important. Quit, wash your head, whatever. But what's the advice as a coach? When do you say quit?
Well, when you find yourself playing along. So when you find yourself playing along, because that's the situation you're in. So I run a lot of coach development sessions. I run a lot of unconference events as well. And there's a rule called the rule of 2 feet. And I talk about this an awful lot. And it's just really important. And I think kids should be taught it as well. I used it with my eldest 2 or 3 weeks ago in a coaching session. And the rule of 2 feet is this: if at any point you don't feel that you're either learning or contributing, then use your 2 feet. Use your 2 feet and go somewhere where you are. So that idea of quitting, so you go, okay, what am I getting from this situation? Am I learning anything? No. Am I actively participating to change the situation? No. Then I'm passive. And so the example the other week was my daughter. She's in parkour, which by its very nature is very, very unstructured. And the coach has given her a task that she just can't do. And it's in a big room. There's a lot of kids in the room, and the coach is struggling to manage every single person in the room. And my daughter just stands there and stares at the task and does nothing. And for a couple of minutes, and I'm just literally like, I'm really trying to deal with my emotions. And I spoke to the coach afterwards, and I got frustrated. I got frustrated on the day, and I'm just like, Ellie, move. And I'm thinking, I don't want to, why am I this person? Why am I being frustrated? I know better, but we're human, we get frustrated. Yeah. And I spoke to the coach afterwards. I said, look, and I spoke to Ellie, and I said, look, the rule of 2 feet is important, because you've got to help kids have agency, have choice, to recognize when they're not learning or contributing, and to go, actually, that task is way too hard for me. I need to come down a couple of levels, and then I can do it. But of course, my kids stood there going, I can't do this. And that's really bad feedback. It's the contrary feedback to the feedback I was getting earlier, where everything is working for me. I've got it. I'm the expert. I've got massive funding. I'm successful. I'm believing my own bullshit. And yet my daughter stood there thinking, I can't do this. Well, the fact is she can. She just has been thrown in at the deep end. The task is way too hard for her, and she stood out of it. Now, she's taken enough agency to stand out of it, but she's there for 2 or 3 minutes. Whereas if I said to the coach, look, give her a task that she can do now, that she can do straight away, and then build up. But equally, talk to the kids about, look, if you don't feel that you can learn or contribute, come to me, come and talk to me, or go and find a task that you think you can do. And that gives them agency. And so that is an important element of practice design. It's an important element of business design. It's an important element of talking around the choices that we have. And again, I come back to, that's coaching, talking about success and failure and the choices that we have.
Yeah, I've seen loads of examples of that in business as well over the years.
So you talk about a moment in your book that should sit very well with founders. You ran a 90-day audit on yourself, what you said you do versus what you actually did. In your head, anything above 80% was a pass. The number came back at 42. That's not a soft number. That's the kind of number a board puts a CEO on notice for. So what did you do with that number in the first week? And why do you think most founders never run that audit on themselves in the first place?
It's not the number you want, Justin, is it? It's not. It's not.
Well, I saw you nodding your head there.
It's not that. It's not. You don't. At that moment in time, you're thinking, "Oh no," and so I got really frustrated with it. And I gave myself a very hard time for a little while. And then it was a really critical moment for me because I looked at it and I thought, well, what's going on here? And the tasks that I completed were all tasks that were individual, all things that I could do. And the vast majority of the tasks that I missed were tasks that involved other people as well. And so that, for me, became a moment in time, right, I'm not very good at this relational side. I'm not very good at this interaction. I'm not very good at working with other people. I'm very good at working on my own. I'm very good at getting stuff done. That I'm good at. I'm not very good at this other side. And that's when I started looking at my coaching, and which at the time was really just instructional coaching, and thinking, well, what is it going to take for me to work with other people? What's it going to take for me what conditions do I need to put in place to be able to be far more effective with the people I'm working with and the people that I interact with? And so part of this journey has been around coaching and around understanding how I can be effective with other people, and therefore understanding how I show up as a person and what other people need from me. So yeah, huge moment, huge learning point. I get it. Most people wouldn't want to hear it. I didn't either at the time. I just felt that everything was up for debate. That's one of the great things about messing up, is that you're ground zero again, and you can look at everything and you can hold it and you can hold it up to the sky and go, what's going on here? It's also not something I recommend, right? I'm not suggesting that people do that. It's not a very pleasant situation. But landing on your ass and having nothing to lose is a very, very powerful place to be, if you are willing to consider another way of doing things. And as I say, that's partly why I wrote the book, because as you said, Liam, there's not many books that talk about success and failure in the way that I've written about it. It's often about the success, and so it becomes valuable. And it was a really, really, really difficult book to write, because I thought, well, who's going to want to listen to this? Like, who am I to write this book? Because I found myself wanting to impress people. I found myself wanting to tell a story about success. Found myself wanting to say, well, I've come out of this and I'm a success, and I really fought hard against it so that I could write about where I was. And there's a saying, isn't there? But people say to me, "Oh, I don't know how you wrote the book," because I'm obviously not a writer. I'm a coach and before that a scientist. So the saying is, if you don't know what to write, write the truth. And that was it. It was such a difficult book to write, and I still find it hard now. I mean, I still find parts of this, talking about the book, hard to manage. I still feel really emotional about it. However, I just felt it was important to write from that place.
I think I know the answer to this in what you're saying, but I'm curious to confirm. How blindsided were you when that audit came back? And 80%'s a pretty high bar in terms of what were you thinking it was going to come back at 72%, and you've got a couple of things to fix and work on and so on and so forth. And when it came back at 42%, I mean, were you shocked by that number? Were you blindsided by what it actually told you about how you were operating and where your weaknesses were? Had they popped up into your psyche prior to that?
It had, because that's why I conducted the audit. I thought, there's something not right here. I'm not getting done what I need to get done. I'm not as productive as I want to be. I'm frustrated and finding it difficult to work with people. I'm taking a lot of this on myself. I'm the hero's narrative, and if you want it done, do it yourself, was strong, and I felt that was destructive and leaving me not such a great person to be around in that sense, because I can do this out of the way. I'm going to do it. So there was definitely, Justin, I wouldn't have said 42% was where I thought I'd end up. But equally, it was clear. It was clear that there was the way that I was dealing with things was not the right way to continue. So it just pointed me in the direction, as I said, of considering my approach to relationships, considering my approach to coaching, examining the narrative that I'm carrying around with me. So yeah, that's where it left me.
I think that you've really touched upon a really important entrepreneurial founder mindset, high performance mindset. We see it in sports, and obviously that was your background, where we do take on more and more and more of ourselves, work harder, push yourself through the pain barrier, look to and which is all good to a point. When and I thought your rule of 2 feet was really, really interesting. But having that HP mindset of pushing through all the time, and then all of a sudden, okay, there's only so many hours in the day, and it takes it takes a very curious mind and strength of will to do what you did there with an audit, to look at where you're failing, rather than just keep on doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I tell a story in the book that I once rode from Canada to Mexico on a mountain bike, and that is a ridiculous thing to do. That's a ridiculous thing to do, and that is points in the direction of somebody who is willing to just get on with it. And so at one point in that race, I realized that I had it. I was scared to death of the race before I did it. And maybe about halfway through, I know I can do this. And at that point, my attention completely switched from survival, getting this thing done that I just need to get from A to B every day. It went completely from that to thinking about my kids. I just had my first child, Ellie, my partner, the business, what else is going on, And I just thought, you can do relentless. Relentless is not the issue here. Just look at your background, look at what you do. What else is going on? Because relentless is part of you anyway. Like, you don't need to max that. You don't need to go for that. That isn't a narrative that is going to help you. That's you. When you turn up, you get in relentless, right? That's coming. That's with you. You're not leaving that behind. Every day you turn up, that's you. So in terms of flexibility, what am I going to add that is going to enhance my experience, other people's experience of working with me, and the kind of the whole the projects I'm building, the experience I want to have. What else am I going to? Because that's coming with you. So that was a point at which I just thought, right, hang on a minute. If you where are you going to go after you've done Canada to Mexico? What's next? I mean, what are you going to go 3 times around the world? What's going on? I as I said, I wrote in the book at one point. America's just is ginormous, obviously, and at one point I read a sign. I'm stood. It was a national park, and it says you are about to enter such and such national park. I can't remember. We were in Colorado somewhere, I think. And I looked down. I had half a bottle of water and a packet of M&Ms. Right, that was it. And I'm thinking, right, I've got about 80 miles to go here. Right, what is going on? And I'm on my Jack Jones. And I've been pedaling all day, every day for 10, 15, 20 days already. And I'm like, well, look, if you can do this, then what else do you need to do? Because I think that's an important point. Most of us, you said, Justin, high performance people are bringing intention. They're bringing work rate. They're bringing relentlessness. They're bringing that mindset. So do we really need to double down on that? It's there. What else are we going to bring to the table? What else do we need? And who else do we need? As importantly. So, yeah, of course, it's an amazing narrative to feed, and people go, oh, okay, yeah, I probably need to do a bit more. If that is your character, you don't need to do any more. You need to consider other elements. Who else is going to help you, and what else do you need? And that comes back to the work that you folks are doing and the conversations you're having, which I'm super grateful to have these conversations and to bring these ideas from the book alive. It's a great opportunity.
So moving on to the next question, which I'm chomping at the bit on because I think there's a lot of gold in this next point. So 2019, correct me if I'm wrong, it was, the estate was repossessed. Yeah, you rock up, the bailiffs are there. Okay, now that is pressure that's built up for years, for 15 years of pressure. Okay, so I suspect that it's come from, like having the whole aura of having this wonderful complex in Cardiff, and that's what kept it going. Everyone talks about, and we talk about it, systems under pressure. When the pressure comes on, what systems you got? You don't have the systems. No one talks about the situation when you're a leader and you got no systems. How do you deal with that? And let's talk about what you did to get over that. Let's talk about, how did you make decision? What was the first step back on the road to make a rational decision? How did you discuss that with your family? This is real pressure.
Yeah, so there's been 2 times in my life where within a split second, I'm somewhere else. I'm completely transported. It is the Dorothy moment where you get picked up in a swirl of wind and you get transported somewhere else. I've had 2 of those experiences in my life. And the first one was, I went out for a run. I was living in East London. I got hit by a van and I got restarted twice. And literally, I don't know how I managed it, but I landed. There was a big kerfuffle, obviously. First person to come was a paramedic. literally was on the scene within a minute, saved my life twice. That's you going from one place to the next and waking up. The second time is I'm coming around the corner. It's an industrial estate in Fairwater in Cardiff, and the gym is barricaded. There's big bolted gates up on the facility, and instantly I knew, like, the world, bang, it's changed. It's completely changed. What was happening before is gone. There's no coming back from this. Your situation has now completely and utterly changed. And it was so, I mean, to give you an idea, for 2 to 3 days afterwards, the next morning, I couldn't get out of bed. And it was the most bizarre experience I've ever had. I had to roll out of bed, and I couldn't put my shoes on. I was that stressed. No, I hadn't asked for this. I couldn't put my shoes. I couldn't bend down and touch my toes. For 2 to 3 days, I was incapable of putting my shoes on. It was that, and I just thought, afterwards, not at the time, I thought, isn't that such an amazing experience about the human body, that you get put into that situation and tells you just how much stress you're under and the reaction to that. And basically, I won't go into the kind of the physiology behind it, but I'm in such a stressed state. I'm in such a state of tension that I'm just like a plank of wood. So your body's just protecting you at that point. And so what do I do? The first thing I do, I come home. I tell my partner Linz that the business is gone. It was awful, because, and I talk about this because I talk around status. The book is around status, and I mentioned it earlier. So public humiliation, which is what that was, is not to be desired. It's used as a method of control in a lot of places. Public humiliation, the risk of public humiliation controls people, and lots of people, very powerfully. I won't go into who uses it, but I'm sure people will understand that. And so public humiliation is that drop in status from, you hear awful stories of people, headmasters who've had bad reports, to people who've lost their businesses, and it's, and they make decisions that aren't reversible. And the drop in status is a really, really dangerous and nasty thing to have happen to you. However, what came out of that for me was this opportunity, which I mentioned earlier, ground zero. So within 2 or 3 days, at this point, probably for about 6 months before that, I was getting up at 3 a.m. and writing for 2 hours before I went to work. So I was beginning to figure out, I was thinking about things. Obviously, I didn't expect that to happen. That was a complete, but I was considering writing, and I was considering where I was going, and I was challenging as part of the audit and as part of the experiences I had before. I was processing those. However, I sat down and I wrote a manifesto. And manifestos can be about, right, well, this thing needs to change. It's basically a training manual. It's like, right, I'm not having this anymore. What is going to change? And so I literally wrote the Good Coach, Bad Coach manifesto. I wrote it for a couple of days after that, and I just basically just went, right, when have I been good and when have I been bad? Because I needed to know when I've been good. Because most of what I was saying was, this isn't good. So I was down on myself a lot, and I needed to pick that up with when have I been good? So I just wrote the Good Coach Bad, and that was a real big moment for me because it allowed me to put things on paper. It allowed me to consider what I was going to do next. I had no idea what I was going to do. However, I just wanted to hold myself up and hold myself accountable. And going back to that story about the bailiff, I'm in that building. It's housed my dreams. It's a 10,000 square foot facility. It looks absolutely stunning. I'd spent about £80,000 in refurb 3 or 4 months beforehand, which is why I'm in debt. I've overspent, and my lease was just coming up, and the landlords thought, we've got a chance here. We've got a chance to monetize these changes. However, the bailiff is in there, and he's gone, right, well, I'll see you again. And I'm thinking, what? What do you mean you'll see me again? You know, and I was so blown away on the day by that. And that just really sat with me for a while. I'm thinking, what does he mean by that? Does he mean that I'm going to make this mistake dressed up in different ways over and over and over again? He must have seen people make the same mistake. He must have seen business people fail twice, fail 3 times, fail 4 times. And I just thought, that's just not me. No chance. So writing that Good Coach, Bad Coach manifesto was basically about me saying, that's it. That's the line. You ain't going over that line again. No chance. It meant, I do this a lot. It gave me a chance that it made it almost impossible for me to go backwards. That I couldn't do that again. By just committing to these ideas and these concepts that I'd written down, I was making sure that I wasn't going to go backwards, and I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. And making it really hard for you not to go back is a very, very good way to change your behavior. So if you, like, a simple example is, if you go in the fridge and you like mayonnaise, well, take the mayonnaise out of the fridge. Don't ever buy it again. It's done. You can't go. It's difficult for you to go back. It's as a simple example, but it's just that idea. By the way, don't ever take the mayonnaise out of my fridge. It will fall out. but it's but. You know, it's that, and that's what that manifesto was, Liam, and that was a massive, massive learning experience for me. Massive learning experience for me.
Do you think the bailiff was like, did you a favour, kind of almost like put you out of your misery so you can make rational decisions again?
100%. He at that point was a good coach.
Yeah.
Whether he was enjoying that moment and rubbing it in and going, I'll see you again, or he was being a guardian angel. I can't tell you. Maybe you can't either. But at that point, I took it as he's being my guardian angel, and he's the world is trying to tell me something, and it's through him. And this is a message: never to do this again.
So what would be your biggest tip? Business leader under massive pressure, got no systems, 9 times out of 10, perhaps it's not their own fault, they're inexperienced, whatever. So, what would be your tip to get through that? I mean, like, to go back to your quit moment, quit earlier, or, once systems are broken, you're gone. So it would be interesting to explore what you think on that, and actually interesting to analyze this podcast full stop on that moment, because it's human nature. Systems are going to break, people are going to break, so
absolutely. Outside perspective, 100% outside perspective, no question about it. How that's presented, people think that providing an outside perspective is to tell somebody this is the other way of doing it, as opposed to showing them. So that bailiff told me, this is the world you're in. This is the world you're in. This is how it works. People punt it, people win, people lose. And the chances are you will lose again. So you're on probability. That's what this is. This is the world you're in. This is the world I'm in. I'll see you again. It's a small world. We're going to go round in a cycle. When you offer an outside perspective, you get an opportunity to see another world. And that's whether that's yes, of course I'm going to say coaching. Yes, of course I'm going to say the work that you folks do. Of course I am. It can come in different ways. Whatever it is, you need an outside perspective at that point. Now, coaches who are skillful will help you see other choices and other information and say, right, now that you've got that other information, what do you want to do about it? What does that mean to you? What have you noticed? And so I give an example in the book, which is an amazing example of coaching, which is a guy called Professor Matthias Lockman changed how football's played in Germany and basically went from, right, kids that play, football is 2 goals, kids are going to play. He went, right, okay, well, what if we put 4 goals in? What happens then? Well, kids score more goals. Kids make more decisions. Kids touch the ball more often. Okay, well, now that we've got that information, what should we do about it? And of course, who would ever put 4 goals instead of 2? Well, that's what a good coach does. So, I mean, could you think of an example, folks, where when you were playing rugby, somebody said, "Oh, could you just throw that in a bit quicker?" Or could you speed that up? Could you slow that down? Could you try that with your right hand? Could you try that with your left? They're introducing new information and giving you a new experience. Have you got any examples where a coach has done that for you?
Yeah, I think a very simple.
London Irish.
Yeah, well, I can think of a few. Obviously, you're training for rugby, you're using a rugby ball, and then all of a sudden, I remember it 30 years ago, you got a coach there, okay, let's do the same drill, but let's put a cricket ball, a volleyball, a soccer ball, American football, all these different things, change the stimulus and see what happens. And all of a sudden, you've got to weight the pass differently, it's changing your perspective, you're having to build more accuracy in a skill that you're usually very competent at.
Yes, exactly that. And so all of a sudden, I think, Jesse, we spoke earlier that I'm incompetent. I haven't got this thing that I thought I had. That's when you begin to learn. Okay, I'm not where I thought I was. I'm not as competent as I thought I was. And that becomes really helpful. Because that's when you get to change, you get to challenge your narrative, you get to, okay, this other information. Yeah, absolutely.
So now you spend a lot of time with founders and coaches. You've sat across people who are running the same players, perhaps you were in 2007. A lot of very positive things, all the external proof as we've discussed. You can probably tell fairly fast who's heading where you were heading. What would you say the tell is? Not the obvious one, the quiet one, the thing that they talk, what they measure, or what they avoid that signals to you that they're already inside that slow version of the same path that you were on.
It comes down to, and we touched on it earlier, is understanding the game that you're playing. So, for example, with a coach, you'll have coaches who are, right, it's about the result, that and it's the immediacy of that feedback. And particularly in development, you might have kids who are not interested in that at all. They're interested in they want to enjoy it with their friends. They want they want the social element. They want the relationship element of coaching. And you've got a coach who's in their world is all about performance, and for the kids it's all about development. So that's an obvious example of when you have got this picture in your mind and you've got metrics in your mind that if I double down on this, and if I say, right, this game is important, this matters, this result matters, and these kids can care less. That is the obvious example of it doesn't. Yes, you've got metrics. Yes, you've got a plan. Yes, you've got all the qualifications you need to produce that performance. contextually missing the point completely. So understanding the game that you're playing. And so the game that I needed to be better at, the performance game I was good at. And that first half of that, running the business, no bother. Even though I was at scale, no bother. Instructional, knew what I was doing, was an expert. Shift with the conditions of being at scale and needing to serve individuals and move into far more general population, I'm still playing the same game that I was playing for performance. I'm playing completely the wrong game for this market. Completely the wrong game. Far more relational, far more collaborative, listening to what's going on. So understanding the game that you're playing is absolutely critical, because everything else around it might sound like you know what you're doing. I've got spreadsheets to die for, but not much good to you. No, it's not much good to you. So yeah, absolutely. It's one of the advantages I've got is I understand it. I understand what it looks like when you're successful, and I also understand what it looks like when you fail, and that gives me a very unique perspective, and it allows me to talk to coaches and founders and people who are building projects, building events, creating experiences, and it allows me to just talk to them and find out where they are, and it allows me to understand what game they think they're playing versus the game that they actually need to be playing. So yeah, absolutely. That's and that, as I say, that's part of this conversation. It's part of the work that you do, and it's part of the work that lots of coaches do in a space which allows people that external view.
So just a quick question on that. Do you think, we spoke a lot about 2008 credit crunch. Do you think where the model started to change is when you had to you move from startup phase into another phase of your business, and that's where it broke down? Nothing to do with the credit crunch, would you say?
It was no. I think I hear what you're saying. It at that point, that project is. There are points I can point at. Definitely, I'm at scale. The credit crunch has come. My narrative around being an expert, and within that, understanding the game that I'm playing, within all of that is the perfect storm that basically pulls the business down in the end. I'm always really careful not to point at one particular moment. As I said earlier, I do think the fact that I started my business at scale, that's your first decision right there, that you're up against it. However, there are lots of other decisions along the way, some of which I'm probably unaware of, that basically led to it unraveling.
Yeah. I mean, it's you obviously. In fairness, you won't be the last person, to experience this. And it's like, you're a relatively young man, I presume, when you started, your business, and probably quite a strong-willed personality. So it's a mistake. Perhaps you made a mistake earlier on, but you think, I'm going to get through it, and it all manifests itself. And it's going to be fascinating to analyze it, because there's so many different perspectives to what we normally talk about. So just we've got 3 short questions to finish with. I'm going to ask question 2 before question 1. The bailiff, as we discussed, told you, "I'll see you again." If you ran into him today, what would you actually say to him? Bear in mind what we discussed as well.
And part of me, and certainly initially wouldn't have said anything. I would have physically done something, but now I'd say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And here's a copy of my book, and it's how much? That's what I would say to him.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I should take some money off him. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I should.
Yeah, he's part of the story.
But I should charge him.
Yeah, absolutely charge him. The thing a founder says in a pitch, there's almost always a lie?
I know what I'm doing.
Know what I'm doing. Okay. Okay. And one word for the version of yourself running Elite Fitness in 2007.
Hopeful.
Hopeful. Okay. Okay. That's the 3 quick fire.
Simon, thank you. Above the exit of Elite Fitness, you had 2 words: to be continued. That's where you ended the book, to honest, specific, and the kind of debrief most founders never get to hear, because the people who could give it to them have already moved on or rebranded the failure into a comeback. Simon, your book, Good Coach, Bad Coach, Build a Practice Where You Belong. It was a fascinating read. This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you very much for your time today with Liam and I. It was a pleasure to have you on the Business End.
Thank you both. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon.